Something like that.
All rise. This report now resumes. You may be seated.
We're back on the record in People, the State of Michigan versus Jeffrey Thomas Willis. File is 16180-816FY. And I've been advised that there was a issue with the bathroom on this floor. Just to tell everybody in the courtroom, there are bathrooms on every floor of the courthouse. That's not the only one that's available. In any event, are we ready to proceed, Mr. Hilson?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hospital?
Yes, Your
All right, you may proceed then, Mr. Hilson.
Your Honor, the people of the state of Michigan call Detective Sergeant Jim McDonald to the stand.
Raise your right hand. The matter now pending first court, you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Have a seat. State your name and profession for the record, please.
Name is James MacDonald, MacDonald, Detective Sergeant with the Michigan Department of State Police.
Judge, for the purposes of this witness, Mr. Hoskins and I had agreed to a stipulation on Tuesday that the number 231-855-4471 belonged to Jeffrey Willis' cell phone.
So it's 231-855-4471.
Correct. And that the number 231-777-0070 belonged to the Willis resident. In that Detective Sergeant Jim McDonald analyzed the cell phone records for Jeffrey Willis's phone number 231-855-4471.
All right. Mr. Hospital?
Yes, Your Honor.
Is that the stipulation?
Yes.
All right, so for the purposes of preliminary examination, I accept that stipulation. You may proceed.
Thank you, Judge. Sergeant McDonald, you indicate you work for the state police, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And how many years have you been with the state police?
I'm in my 27th year, sir.
Now, you were asked to assist in this particular investigation, is that correct?
Correct.
And when you say investigation, we're talking the, I would call it the bulk, the overall investigation. The disappearance of Jessica Heeringa, the murder of Rebecca Bletch, and the abduction of MJN. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, your background has an interesting specialty in phone records and their analysis. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Could you describe for the court kind of your training and experience in that area?
Yes, sir. I'm assigned to the Technical Services Unit. Our unit, and I have been for 20 years, our unit is a support unit that we assist investigators from across the state with various technical matters, including cell phone analysis, more on the record side than the physical phone itself. But we try to help out the investigators with various technical aspects of their investigation.
Can you describe in general then, Sergeant McDonald, kind of where you and your team fit as far as an investigation? What exactly are you taking from the records and how are you analyzing them?
The investigators will supply us with the records that they receive from the phone company. We'll take the records, we'll verify first of all that they're correct for the correct time frame, and then we can manually plot them, and we can also take and use an automated system where we can input the records, set parameters for if there's a time offset, and then we can make an output, a visual map for the investigator so they can get an idea of what the phone was doing.
In particular, or maybe drilling down in a little more detail, Sergeant McDonald, essentially, is it true that in every part of the state, including this county, there are cell towers?
Yes, sir.
And I'm certainly no expert, but cell companies either put those towers up or they lease or buy them. Is that
Correct. Yes, there's various ways. They can either buy them or they lease space off of another company's tower.
And in particular, how our cell phones react to those towers? Can you describe, when it comes to cell site, what I'll call cell site data? What are you looking at?
Well, the phone companies what they do is they take a tower and they'll divide the tower up into what we call sectors. The sectors are, they propagate RF from the tower. When a phone comes in, the phone communicates with that tower, making records, call records, data records. There's various types of records it can make, but usually call records are the ones we're most interested in. So there'll be a record of a communication with the tower, and then obviously what the phone did, if it made a call, if it received a call.
And in particular, when it comes to, for instance, pinpointing the potential location of the phone itself, how do you use that information?
The tower information will give us the tower, obviously, which is a set area by GPS coordinates. We know physically where the tower's at. And then the sectors will propagate from that tower. So the record will give us the tower, which we know, and then it'll give us the sector. So we can make an assumption from where the tower and the phone is. Not the exact location of the phone, but we can definitely tell you what sector it's in when it's making a call record.
And so just for the record and maybe for the judges and my education, we're talking sectors, and these towers obviously they go up and down, and the sectors are at the top. If
you imagine if you're looking over top, if you're at a bird and you're looking down on the tower, if you imagine the tower as a point, then you imagine a pie around that tower, and you cut that pie into 3 equal pieces. Each one of those pieces would be a sector.
Okay. So there's a sector there's 3 sectors, one's pointing one direction, and one's pointing another direction, and one's pointing the other direction.
Correct.
And does it depend on where the phone is, depending on what sector it's going to hit on that tower?
Yes, the geographic location of the phone is, like for example, if a phone is north of a tower, the geographic location, there's no way that the phone can hit on a sector on the south side of the tower if it was north of it. So the sector is always going to provide the service to the phone from that tower. So if it's north or northeast or northwest, that's the direction the phone was from away from the physical tower.
And I assume, sir, that you've gone through training as it relates to how this all works and how it works for police investigations.
Yes, sir.
I would assume also that you continue your training when it's offered.
Yes, sir.
And I know you've done this for quite a few years. Have you testified in court on this particular matter before?
Yes, sir.
Roughly how many times?
Probably about 4 or 5.
Okay. And I'm assuming, and I think you kind of said this in your answer, but a majority of your work has to do with cell phones in relation to cell site data or cell tower data. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes.
Your Honor, I move for Sergeant McDonald to be recognized as an expert in the area of cell phone, in particular cell site data and tower data.
For purposes of the preliminary exam, Your Honor, I
Right, under Michigan Rule of Evidence 702, the court will recognize Detective Sergeant James McDonald as an expert in the area of the analysis of cellular telephones and cellular telephone cell site data, I believe it would be.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
For the purposes of this particular investigation, Sergeant McDonald, you received the AT&T cell phone records for the cell phone belonging to Jeffrey Willis. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And in particular, what dates were you looking at?
I was asked by the investigators to look at April 26, 2013 to April 27, 2013.
And the records you obtained, first of all, what cell company was this?
AT&T.
The records that you obtained from AT&T, did that provide you the information that you needed in order to do your analysis?
Yes, sir.
I'm handing you what's been marked as People's Exhibit 78. Just can you page through that real quick, just so that we're looking at the right document.
Yes, sir.
Is that, I guess, the product of the analysis you did for those particular dates on that particular phone?
Yes, sir.
Now, let's talk about April 26th, the early mornings of April 26th, 2013, 12:30 a.m. Were you able to make a determination if the cell phone belonging to Jeffrey Willis was, I guess, out and about in the early morning hours that day?
Yes, sir. On the raw records, if I can just explain, the raw records, the time that the records come in is called UTC, Universal Time Coordinated. So it's just a time standard. So to get the time back to Michigan time, depending on the daylight saving Eastern, and this time we have to subtract 4 hours. So on 12/26, which on the raw records will actually show it as 20. Sorry, it'll actually show it on the 26th at 4:30 in the morning, which is actually 12:30 in the morning. And that phone did generate a call record.
Okay. And does it indicate whether it was receiving or sending out a call that particular?
That's an outgoing call, denoted by the MO for mobile outgoing, originating.
Okay. And were you able to determine what number that phone was calling?
Yes, sir. The originating number is the 855-4471, and it dialed 231-777-0070.
Which has been stipulated to the Willis residence.
Correct, sir.
Okay. And were you able then, or did the records provide you a location, a tower location where that phone was using, and the sector that the tower?
Yes, sir. The raw records will show, they give the tower information as a GPS coordinate. So that GPS coordinate has been plotted, and then also it'll show you a azimuth from the tower, which in this instance was 30 degrees from north.
Okay. And, sir, how did that plot out then?
Can we look at the map, sir? Can I show it to you?
It's right there in that.
Yep. So that, there,
Maybe if you show the court.
Yes, sir. So that if you look at that, the piece of the pie, where the angles come together, that would be where the cell tower is located at. And then that piece of the pie would be the sector that the call was made from.
And in particular, Sergeant, were you aware of a couple of addresses that were of interest in this investigation, that being Mr. Willis's address at 1842 South Sheridan and a residence that had once been owned by a grandfather, 3038 Bailey?
Yes, sir.
And from your observations or from your mapping on that particular date at that time, do any one of those addresses fall within that sector?
Yes, sir. The Bailey House falls in that sector.
And I know you indicated that where the two lines come together is where the tower is at.
Correct, sir.
I mean, are you able to determine how far, and maybe it's not even relevant, how far away from the tower that's hitting, or was just hitting that tower?
The call is hitting on that sector from that tower. Now, the propagation of the signal we draw this picture because it's very easy and it demonstrates how we can view or get a graphic view of where the tower's at. Cell tower propagation aren't perfectly straight lines. And range is always something that's affected by weather, the terrain, where the handheld device is at.
But I think you indicated in part of your early testimony, given what cell tower that phone is using and the sector that phone is using, 3038 Bailey is a possibility of that phone being there.
Absolutely, sir.
Okay. I want to move to now. I want to move then to later on in the evening. We've had testimony in this court that the window that Jessica could have been or was taken was she was last seen alive around 10:52 p.m. on the 26th of April 2013, and a customer has testified that he walked in approximately 11:07 p.m. on that same night and no one was around. Were you able to analyze the cell phone records tied to the defendant's phone on April 26, 2013?
Yes, sir.
In particular, around the 11:23 p.m. mark, did you find anything?
Yes, sir. There was a call. There was a call record generated. It was an incoming call from the Willis residence to Mr. Willis's cell phone.
Okay. Now, in this particular analysis, what did you discover?
The call originated in the same sector as where the Bailey house was at. And then during that very brief duration, it switched to a second tower, which is just west of 31, and it points west.
Okay. And given your training and experience and knowledge, did you formulate an opinion as to why it might move from one sector to the other in that short period of time?
It's been my experience that you can have a phone stationary. You can change something with the environment that the phone was in. For example, if you were behind a large metal object or in a basement and came up, or there's a very reasons, but you don't have to geographically move a great distance for the phone to want to switch to a stronger signal, stronger tower.
Is that how these cell phones are designed? They look for the strongest possible signal to latch onto?
Yes. If it's making a phone call, the voice always overrides data. It's always going to try to find the strongest tower, strongest signal.
And just so I understand, then, at 11:23 PM on April 26, 2013, the Willis residence was calling the defendant's cell phone.
Correct.
All right. And that the Bailey Street, or this Bailey Road address fits within that particular sector of that call.
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, were there any other calls that particular night on April 26, 2013 from that phone?
There was another call coming from the Willis residence to the cell phone at 11:59 PM.
And again, were you able to determine the cell tower and sector that the defendant's cell phone was using?
Yes, sir.
And what was it?
There was the same tower we originally talked about that encompasses where the Bailey house is at.
And that was, just so I'm clear, 11:59 PM on April 26, 2013.
Yes, sir.
Now, moving on to April 27th, 2013, was there some activity on that phone shortly after 11:59, like around midnight?
Yes, sir. At the 11:59 call, according to the raw records, went to a voicemail. Because of the type of phone Mr. Willis had, what happens is the AT&T sends it comes across in the raw records as a text message. It's not a text message. What it is, it's a signaling to let you know you've missed a call or that you have a voicemail waiting. So it shows up when I run it through my automated system. It shows a text, but it really isn't. It's messaging from the AT&T to the handset to let them know that you've missed a call or that you have a voicemail.
And is that what is happening right at midnight on April 27th, 2013?
Yes, sir. That's the message from AT&T to the handset, letting them know that he's missed a call or that there's a voicemail waiting.
And again, were you able to determine the location of the tower and the sector that phone was using?
That message did generate, and it was hitting on the same tower in the same sector, which encompasses the Bailey house.
Okay.
So, Mr. Hilson, I have to interrupt you. There was an 11:23 phone call. There was an 11:59 phone call. Are we talking about a third phone call, or are you describing the 11:59 PM phone call?
I'm describing a controlled message that comes from AT&T to the handset. It came right at midnight to the handset, to the cell phone, denoting that there was a missed call or a voicemail.
Right. So is that the 11:59 call, or
That's
is it different?
it's a different record. It's 12 a.m.
Thank you.
Now, again, sticking with April 27th, 2013, in the early morning hours, were you able to discover more activity on that phone?
Yes, sir. At 12:05 a.m. on the 27th, there was an outgoing call from Mr. Willis's cell phone to the residence, his residence, and the tower that we had talked about, second one that's just west of 31 that faces west.
Now, what is unique about the analysis of this particular phone call as compared to the other ones you've testified to?
What I found with this particular call is that it's just like that previous call record we had talked about where it had switched towers. It doesn't necessarily mean the phone's moving, but it switched towers. This one hit on the second tower. So that first call we had talked about at 11:23 went from the original tower we had talked about to this one just west of 31. That's where it finished. And this one started on that second tower, which to me, it means the phone is now in a stronger area so that the second tower is being the more preferred tower by the handset.
And just for the record, Sergeant McDonald, in this particular record, that tower, that sector is facing in what direction?
West.
So, does it still encompass Bailey, 3038 Bailey?
In my opinion, it would.
Does it encompass at all the Sheridan Street address, 1842 South Sheridan?
Absolutely not.
Now, as you analyze the records, and my question is related to analyze the records from April 27th, 2013 at 12:05 phone call, when was the next piece of activity that you discovered?
The next record that the phone made was at 3:47 p.m. that day.
Was there any activity between 12:05 and 3:47 p.m. on that particular phone?
None, sir.
Does that, I mean, do you have an opinion, or is there an explanation for that in your opinion?
The only reason,
You're on speculation.
Right, the objection is that speculation, Mr. Hilton.
Well, Judge, as we've talked about, Sergeant McDonald is an expert in analyzing raw records, cell phone, cell site data, and what that data tells us. If the court wants me to lay a little bit more foundation, I can do that, but I think this fits right within his expertise.
So I think your question was, with respect to the time period of 12:05 a.m. to 3:47 p.m. on April 27 of 2013, what does that mean to him, I think was the question.
But there was no, the question was, he had indicated there was no activity from that time frame.
Yeah.
And I asked him if he had an opinion based on his area of expertise.
Right. Well, Sergeant McDonald's been admitted as an expert under 702 with respect to the analysis of these records, and I believe it's within his purview to answer that question. I don't believe that that's speculative. Mr. Hoskins?
Well, Your Honor, he said he already testified there was no activity between 12:05 and 3:47 in this particular phone. And then the follow-up question is, why do you think that is? I mean, that calls for speculation as to my ears, it's requesting him to explain why there would be no calls or no text during a certain period of time. I mean, he's already answered his own question by saying there was no activity. I mean, what more information can he provide other than speculation as to why that might be?
Right. I'll hear the answer and then make a ruling. Go ahead.
from 12:05 to 3:47, there's no activity, which means if you just ignored your phone, you would create a record. You would have a record being generated that you've ignored a call, it went to voicemail. If your phone is turned off or the battery is pulled out, the system doesn't recognize that there's any service, like they won't deliver anything, so they're not creating any records. So when I look at this, there's no records. To me, the phone is shut off.
Well, what if, just a minute, what if you just didn't get any phone calls and didn't make any phone calls?
Absolutely, sir. That's another possibility.
So either of those two circumstances could be the case then. No phone calls being sent or received, or the phone being turned off.
Yes, sir.
Right. Well, that doesn't take expert testimony. I mean,
No, he's trying to elicit testimony from an expert as to speculate that the phone might have been off is where we're going here, Judge. And it's just pure speculation. What he can testify to is that there was no activity, not what he thinks the reason is. In other words, that he thinks the phone was off. I mean,
well, Mr. Oscar, he's given two potential scenarios on why that circumstance might be as demonstrated in the record, and I'll accept either of those. Mr. Hilson, anything more on this?
That was going to be my point, Judge. He's offering the two possibilities.
All right, well, Mr. Oscar.
if he's offering the two possibilities, Judge, then I understand that, and I'll withdraw the objection. But I anticipated he was going to offer an opinion that the phone was off. So with the two possibilities out there, I won't object.
I'll receive the answer as given by Sergeant McDonald. I don't think that takes expert testimony to come to that conclusion. But I don't think the answer under the two alternatives is speculative in any way. So I'm going to receive it. I will rule the objection. Go ahead.
Just so we complete the story here, Sergeant McDonald is the phone at 3:47 that afternoon on April 27, 2013, is the phone receiving a call or sending a call?
It's their outgoing voice call.
And did you get a sense as to where it was bouncing off of?
Yes, sir. The call initiated in a sector that is 31 north of the River Flats or north by Dalton. The call started in that sector, and it ended on the same tower, but on the sector facing south.
Now, based on that analysis or that mapping, are you able to determine a couple of things, either movement or direction?
Yes, sir. If it started in the north sector and finished in the south sector, I can only my only conclusion that it's traveling from north to south.
Okay. So your opinion then is that at the time of this phone call, the phone is on US 31 going south on US 31 by the river flat.
It'd be north of that, sir, but yes.
Sorry.
Yep.
Around that location.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sergeant McDonald, I have handed you what was marked as People's Exhibit, I believe, 78. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And does that exhibit contain the mapping that you've been testifying about here today?
Yes, sir.
Including the conclusion, well, you verbalized the conclusions you drew from it, but was that based off of that particular exhibit that you had created?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, I move 78, Judge. I move for the admission of the People's Exhibit 78.
There being no objection to proposed 78, 78 will be received.
I have no further questions, Judge, at this witness.
Ross, Mr. Hunt.
Morning, Sergeant McDonald.
Good morning, sir.
You started off your testimony by telling the court you can definitely tell what sector a phone is when it's used.
Yes, sir.
Later on, during Mr. Hilson's questioning, you indicated that a phone doesn't necessarily have to be moving for it to switch from one tower to another, from one sector to another.
Correct.
How do you reconcile those two statements?
I think that if I can answer your question, I think the call record we were talking about, the sectors are on two different towers, and those sectors would intersect each other. So if you're in a fringe area, or if you're something environmentally changed with your phone will they want to give you service, it'll switch to the strongest signal. So if it went from one tower to a sector to another tower to a sector, it's just because something environmentally, whether something could change physically, that it's going to want to switch to a different tower and sector with a stronger signal.
Okay, but those sectors would overlap to a certain extent, right?
They will overlap. That's yes.
But the rest of the wedge doesn't overlap.
No, sir.
Okay, so you cannot be absolutely positive which sector it is if the two overlap. Correct?
I know from the phone records which tower and sector that the phone is hitting on. And if it switches during a call, I know if it switched to a different tower and sector. So I know it's in that tower and sector. Range, the propagation of the signal is all varying, and it varies from day to day, from hour to hour for every tower and sector. So even though these two sectors overlap each other to some extent, there may be a lobe that's bigger that comes in just because of an environmental condition or just something that weather may be dictated that the signal may reach farther and lower. And it might be different today than it is tomorrow. I don't know if that answers your question or makes sense to you.
How large is the largest span of the wedge, the biggest part of the pie?
Well, these wedges, these are just graphic, just to give you an idea that that's the direction from the tower that sector faces. Now, AT&T, on some of the records, if we're lucky, they'll actually put the, along with the azimuth, they'll put the beam width. The beam width in some cases will be 120 degrees, but that's rarely true anymore. Usually there'll be, like I'm looking at some records, they'll say 64 or 65. So if you imagine 64 or 65 degrees, that's the beam width of that sector.
Okay, and in order to determine how much of a geographic range it covers, you have to know how far out it extends.
Well, and you can do that a little bit by plotting other towers from the same company, and then you kind of overlap them, because the cell phone companies want to make sure you have service. So they don't want to have a dead spot. So they're going to try to push the range. But like I said, sometimes they can have towers and they can increase the power to make the sectors larger, and sometimes they decrease the power and put more towers to make the range smaller. So in this case, I did look at other towers in the area, and you just estimate on the range. You can't, like I said, the pictures are just for graphic, to give you an idea of which direction the phone was communicating with the tower in.
May I, Judge?
You may.
So the wedge, as far as the angle, is pretty much clear.
The azimuth is a fact,
That's what that's
yes.
called, the angle.
Well, if
Degree
you
of,
if you draw a line right through the center of that wedge, that's the azimuth of that sector.
Okay.
And then, like I said, just for graphic purposes, we make it 120 degrees to show you give you a graphic demonstration of where the sector is at.
Okay. But the curved portion at the furthest extent is generally an unknown.
Unknown.
Okay. Did you say earlier, I may have misheard it, that a phone could just bounce from one tower to another just because the other has a stronger signal?
I did say that. If you were in a sector
That overlap.
that overlapped, it might bounce to the other tower because the signal is better, cleaner for the phone.
Okay. But cell towers don't have unlimited capacity either, right?
Not that I'm aware of.
They can be overwhelmed by a large number of calls?
Yes, and you usually see that at peak hours.
Okay. Like a Friday night.
I've never seen it, and personally, I've never seen it. But like in this area of Muskegon where we're at, I've seen it in Grand Rapids and different places where there's larger population. But I haven't seen it here. Doesn't mean it can't happen here. I just haven't seen it here.
Well, my question is, wouldn't you expect a larger call volume on a Friday night than, say, Sunday afternoon?
I can't speculate to that. If
Well, you've
I-
studied this.
I have, but I mean, a Sunday afternoon in West Michigan, a lot of people are going to church. So I mean, there's a lot of people using phones on a Sunday
Maybe that's a
afternoon.
bad example. How about a Monday afternoon versus a Friday night?
It's been my experience that the peak hours are usually morning rush hour, lunchtime, and the evening rush hour back home. Those are usually your three highest demand times for the cell networks.
Okay. Those are greater than a Friday or a Saturday night?
Yes, sir.
But the fact is, a tower can get overwhelmed, whatever time of day it is, in which case the signal will bounce to a different tower to accommodate it, correct?
Yes. If I can just tell you, AT&T runs data and voice on their towers. They have a protocol called voice over data. So if for example, if you were texting and you were using the tower that I was going to make a phone call on, and the tower capacity was very near to capacity, what it would do, it would switch your data to a different tower. Because of the technology that data uses, it's more robust. It can travel further. It'll actually switch it to a different tower. It'd be the same direction, but it's going to give my voice call a priority over your data connection.
Is there any difference between a phone with a regular service provider and a track phone?
As far as the records go, no. The raw records, I think we can we usually have better records, to be honest with you, with post-pay phones instead of prepaid phones.
Can you explain the difference of those two?
A post-pay would be someone who has an account with AT&T, signs up, gets a phone, and then they get their monthly bill and they pay it. A prepaid phone is someone who has either a credit card or calls in and basically puts minutes to use on their account.
And that also is called a track phone.
It depends. Different areas, there's different phones, yeah. I mean, I think this one we're talking about is a track phone.
Now, the question that bothered me, that I objected to, was about the gap in time between 12:05 and 3:47. What could that mean? And you did clear it up. It could mean, yeah, there's just nothing coming in or going out. Or the phone could be shut off. But I did read your, I think they're your reports, but there was some conclusions drawn about calls going straight to voicemail. And the conclusion was that it must be the phone was off. But the cell tower still picked it up. Is that true?
I guess I want to ask you which records you're referring to, like, because I don't want to.
Take, for example, the 11:59 p.m. call on April 26th. Call from home, Mr. Willis's, in the sector of Mr. Willis's home, to a different sector where his cell phone allegedly was, according to your opinion. That went straight to voicemail. Was it not your opinion that that meant that phone was off?
No, sir. Because it generated a tower record. The phone's not off if it's generating a tower record. When you have your phone and you turn your phone on, the first time you turn it on, it registers with the cell phone company. You know, whichever provider you have, Verizon, AT&T, Sprint. What happens is you have, there's different, in this, keep it simple, with AT&T, there's an IMSI and an IMEI. They're both, what they are is they're a set of numbers meshed together that they let you know that your phone is available. So your phone will register the first time, and then what it'll do is occasionally it's going to send out almost like a ping where it's going to want to make sure you're available for a call. Usually, and now in this day and age, it doesn't. It used to do it regularly, like every 15 half hour. Now it does it pre-call, and it's such a fast relay. We don't even notice a delay. What it'll do, it'll send out the signal and say your phone's out there. All right, I've got either an incoming call for you, or you're trying to make a call. I see you're out there, and it'll let the call go through. If your phone's not on, it's not going to generate a tower record. There won't be a tower record to be generated because your phone's not on.
How does a call go straight to voicemail?
A call goes straight to voicemail either because someone doesn't want to answer it, or because the phone maybe rang, and like I said, sometimes geographic, physical conditions of the phone, maybe the call started and it got interrupted, the signal got interrupted, and it'll go right to voicemail.
The impressions I get from the reports is going straight to voicemail means the phone didn't ring. Is that wrong?
No, I don't think that's wrong. If you think it went right straight to voice, it could ring once. It could have started to ring and been interrupted so that even the user might not have identified that his phone was ringing.
Okay, so the term straight to voicemail doesn't mean your phone didn't ring. And it doesn't mean you had your phone shut off. It could be ringing and you just didn't answer it. So
Could
straight
be.
to voicemail means you just didn't answer your phone.
On this one, what I find interesting, it's only 20 seconds. The call, the record you were indicating, the seizure time is only 20 seconds. So, and the seizure time is different than the elapsed time. The seizure time is from the time that the call came into the tower and is getting routed to the phone. So on this one, being only 20 seconds, it seems to me either the phone, I'm guilty of it. I put my phone on vibrate, and sometimes I just don't hear it or don't feel it vibrate or ring, and it'll go. But usually that's going to be a longer elapsed time of a sequence. If it's only 20 seconds, it's almost like someone either didn't want to answer it or it just didn't complete the transaction.
And that could be because of something to do with the signal rather than the recipient's.
Correct. Yeah, you could be like I say, you could be in a physical area. You could have some kind of obstruction that the RF isn't quite strong. It's not finishing it. Absolutely.
The call on April 27th at 12 a.m. You said it registered as a text.
It did.
Okay. Are you saying you know it was not a text?
Yes, sir.
Can you clear that up for me?
Yes, sir, because it was very confusing to me. I've done these records, and it came across as an odd number, only a 4-digit number. And to me, that was very strange. I thought that's odd. That can't be right. And I did some research onto, they call them short codes. If you've ever been lucky enough or unlucky enough to receive automated text messages, they come from short codes. But this one didn't even meet the criteria. It was only a 4-digit number. So I got a hold of AT&T and talked to an analyst and said, I see this number come up. I don't understand why it's coming up. And only that one. And I was informed that that's a messaging. It's a messaging from AT&T, from the system, to the handset to let them know that it could be one or two things. Either they missed a call or they have a voicemail. They could be one and the same, too, if the voicemail was left.
The records you have described it as a text.
That's how my automated system recognized it. The map you see is generated from an automated system, and it recognized it as a text.
Okay, so when I'm looking at the results, just hypothetically, your automated records, and I see something that says a text, I can't read anything into that then, right? Could be anything. Could be a call, could be a straight to voicemail, could be a text.
Well, the records are the records. I can't change those. What I do is I take those and put them into my system, and then I generate my report in these maps from my system. That's when I'm sorry if I'm misleading there. When I say automated, they're from my system. So I'm taking the raw records and I'm putting them into my system. And then what happens is my system recognizes it as a text because it didn't recognize 10 digits or 13 digits.
Right, I get that. But if I'm looking at the results from your system and I see something that says it's a text, I can't count on it being a text, right?
Correct. Yes, because what I did is, that's why I went and did the research on it, sir.
Just so we're clear, Sergeant McDonald, when we're talking about incoming and outgoing phone numbers, in other words, an incoming call from the Willis residence, that's not a sector, that's an actual phone call coming from the Willis residence to that cell phone. Is that accurate?
Right. Because that phone was considered a landline, it's coming into the AT&T, their control center, and then it gets routed to the phone through the tower.
Gotcha. Instead of vice versa, when we see outgoing from the defendant's cell phone to residence, that's an actual phone call from that number to the Willis residence.
Correct.
And it's not floating, those are concrete things.
Yeah, it's using the tower. It's making connection to the tower, which then is making the connection to the appropriate destination where the call was routed.
Okay, fair enough. I have nothing else.
I just have one question, Sergeant. Now,
Yes, sir.
reference your exhibit that you have in your hand right now. And I just want to be clear on some questions that Mr. Costick had raised. And I'm referencing Exhibit 78. So for instance, on this, you see, you've got the sector identified.
Correct, sir.
Right. Basically northeast, correct?
Correct.
And if I'm understanding your testimony correctly, using this just as an example, if the phone call, for some reason under Mr. Hostika's scenario that the tower was overwhelmed and had to switch to a different tower, wouldn't it switch to another tower within that same sector but somewhere northeast of here?
Your Honor,
Follow my question?
yeah, I know what you're asking. It would, if it switched to a different tower, it would be a sector that would point to where that call was coming from. So in this case, if the call was generated here, and I did go through and plot AT&T towers in the area. I know that's not an exhibit, but I wanted to get a visual of where the other towers were at in case there was an overload or where would it jump to. But if for example, if the call was started in that tower, and I think we have some records that show it, and then it's hitting on a different tower and sector that encompasses the same geographic area.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
If I'm wrong about that, tell me.
No, you're correct. I mean, in not only necessarily overwhelmed, if that tower was overwhelmed, sometimes it could just be that the signal just got a little bit sweeter in that different spot, and it might jump to that other tower in that sector.
But it's also it would include the geographic area of where the call is being generated from.
Correct.
All right, thank you. Mr. Hilson, any questions based upon my question of the sergeant?
No, Judge.
And Mr. Hosek, any questions based upon my question of the sergeant? All right.
Actually, Art, maybe I do. Mr.
Sure, go ahead, take your time.
Are there towers near the Getty Drive-In for AT&T? On Enora Getty Drive-In?
Yes, sir. Yes, I mean, there's the one tower that we've been, I think we've talked about quite a bit.
Is that the tower that
Yes,
you identify as being the one that services the residents?
that's the one that the phone was using.
That you've determined, or you believe came from the geographic, that would service the area that covers the residents?
Yes, that's the tower, yes.
Sir, did you know, I think you said this already, the phone Mr. Willis used, the cell phone, the number 855 number, that is a track phone, correct?
I believe so. I don't recall. I know it was a prepaid phone. I don't recall. Track phone is the one usually in West Michigan for AT&T.
Okay, but a prepaid phone, not a postpaid. That you
Correct.
explained the difference. Okay, thank you. Nothing further?
I just have one other question. It'll save me getting a dictionary out. Azimuth. What does that mean? Direction?
Azimuth it's usually denoted by a degree. So if you imagine a circle with 360 degrees, and if it says the azimuth is 30 degrees, then if you drew a line from the center 30 degrees from, with
That's
zero
it.
being true north, that
So
would
it's
be
like
your
the
azimuth.
line.
Yes.
All right, okay. Yes, I have nothing else. Anything, Mr. Hoskins?
No, sir.
Thank you, Sergeant.
Thank you, sir.
Is he excused?
Yes.
We may be excused. If I could talk to Mr. Hilson and Mr. Hoskins at a sidebar. Right, Mr. Hill.
People would call Lieutenant Jeff Crump to the stand.
Oh,
The matter now pending for this court, you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
yes.
Have a seat, state your name, profession, record, please.
Jeff Crump, C-R-U-M-P.
Judge, just for the record, I just want to make sure that I get this right, this in our sidebar conversation. I'm going to offer via stipulation between myself and Mr. Hostetler. First, Lieutenant Crump's qualifications in the area of firearm and tool mark identification as an expert.
Mr. Hoskins.
So stipulated.
Right. Lieutenant Crump will be received under Michigan Rule of Evidence 702 as an expert in the area of firearm and tool mark identification.
And the other, excuse me, the other stipulation, my understanding is that we're stipulating that Lieutenant Crump did in fact examine the Walther P-22 that's already been admitted into evidence, the shell casings and bullets and bullet fragments taken from the Rebecca Bletch homicide scene. And I think that's it. If I'm not mistaken.
Mr.
Yes.
Mr. Hoskins, as to the second stipulation.
So stipulated.
All right, so the court will receive, as stipulated fact, the following, that Lieutenant Crump is an expert in firearm and tool mark identification, and that Lieutenant Crump examined the Walther P-22 caliber handgun, that is exhibit number,
Exhibit number 76, Judge.
exhibit number 76, and conducted analysis with respect to shell casing
I've got those
and
numbers.
bullet fragments. Go ahead.
That would be People's Exhibit 64, 65, and 67.